Well, welcome back to the garage. This has been in my way for a number of years. I've been using it as a workbench. But in reality, underneath this is a kind of a classic Zenith console TV from 1969. The name of this, Zenith had a name for everything, and this was called the Bradley. And their description is that this is a charming, early American-style console in genuine maple veneers and select hardwood solids. It has their 23-inch diagonal giant screen, and it's the model Z6547M. I picked it up quite a few years ago from a gentleman off of eBay. I drove the better part of a day to where he lived and picked it up. And it's tremendously heavy. And I had bought it because I kind of thought I would just maybe use the chassis for parts. But the more I looked into this model, it really was considerably different than the X year. I have a couple of 1967 Zenith consoles, and this is a different chassis. They had really gone to a lot of solid state components by this time, but still a lot of tubes in it. The story was that this gentleman that I bought it from had found it in an abandoned house. He was looking for a place he could buy some property and build a cabin, something like that. He found this old house, and inside of it was this old TV, this Zenith. He took it and he said that he was going to make a bar out of this. He was going to take the guts out and make a bar out of it, and then later on he decided that he was going to give up drinking. He didn't want it anymore, so he put it on eBay. I ended up with this beauty, this 1969, and but I literally have not seen this for a couple of years. So I don't know if I showed you this. The door. So on the outside we have channel higher, channel lower, and on, off. AFC on and off. And inside we have our color level, our tint, our volume, UHF and VHF tuning. This is, as I mentioned, it's a Space Command 600, which means that the color controls are motorized and the channel changer is motorized and the volume is motorized. So this should be a pretty complex set inside. It initially had casters, but two of the casters have rotted off, so this must have been submerged in a certain amount of water. But we'll take a look at the back of this. And this is pretty interesting, I think. This is a piece of twin lead, antenna lead. And this was just hanging on there just like this when I got it. So that would tell us that the last time this set was used was still during analog television broadcast. And that's been gone for well over 10 years, more like 15. So this most likely hasn't seen power in 15 years, 20 years. Zenith Incorporated. Call Zenith for some service on your 2916 White Oak Drive. Doesn't say the city or the state. I guess that's the way it was in those days. You just sort of made assumptions about things. And it definitely looks like this has been worked a lot. The back of this cabinet. Oh, there's a clip on here. There we go. That is it. 1969 goodness. And goodness gracious, this is pretty dirty. 16Z7 C50Z. First thing to note, I guess, would be the condition of some of these tubes just at a glance. They're just baked. What does this look like? Oh my goodness. Now granted it's dirty, but but I don't think it's that dirty. This isn't any good. And the damper. Yep. On and on. Okay. Well, yeah, okay, right? Doesn't mean that we couldn't get a raster. Back here, the tuner. And all of the complexities that comes with a Space Command set of the vintage motors for the color controls, volume. Right down there is the Convergence board. Behind this panel is access to the Convergence controls, but I don't know until I fool around with it how to even get this panel out. I have to fool around with that. I do have service literature from Zenith, and I have the SAMs for this, so that'll be something that we can get into. I wonder what our high voltage cage looks like. Huh. Pretty ugly. I'm going to need a nut driver to take this part off. Well, can't judge a book by its cover. Well, I took the rest of the back of the high voltage cage off, and yeah, it's filthy, of course. Filthy. And take a look at this focus rectifier here. Yeah, we should replace that. Even this cap. And I took out the horizontal output tube also. This is a 6LB6. Is that what this is? I believe the LF6. Yeah, 6LB6. I understand the 6LF6 and the 6JSC are interchangeable. So we'll see. But this one also is... that getter is completely gone. So we're not going to throw power to the high voltage section until I'm not even going to bother testing these. I'm just going to change them out for now. But we got to replace that. Test a few things, maybe brush the dirt out. It's just going to be, at the very least, that dirt's going to be conductive. But first we're going to come over here. We're going to pull the socket off. And we're going to take a look at the back of the picture tube, test it with our trusty Syncor CR70. I don't know exactly which tube it is, but I think they're all pretty much the same in terms of the hookup. I just looked at the specs for the 25AP22. Yeah, I wanted to take a look at the back of the CRT, where those cups are in back. For lack of better expression, I think they're the first grids. So we just have to get at this with the an opened end wrench or something. It's like a 1/4 inch. Just be very delicate with this. I marked the position of this assembly. It's your purity rings and the blue lateral magnet all in an assembly, and should be able to just slide this off now. I don't need two hands here. I'm going to pull the socket off and slide this off, and we'll see what the cups look like underneath. Well, this TV set is still kind of a mystery to me, because look at the condition of this, the neck of this CRT. It's incredibly clean inside. Not a lot of heat damage, annealing from years of use and heat, but yet on the other hand, this assembly, this purity ring and horizontal blue lateral magnet assembly is just deteriorating from the heat. The plastic is just brittle, and that piece of plastic in my hand is just one of the part of that right there. Goes right there, holds this assembly onto the neck properly. So I have another one of these. I'm going to replace it eventually, but right now, just trying to get an idea of this set. This cannot possibly be the original picture tube at this point, just sort of from what we've seen. From the heat that we've seen, the damage to the chassis is in contrast to what we're seeing here. This is like the life ring of a picture tube, and this just says that it's been used and it was hot, and so we're just going to put it back the way we had it, being careful not to break the evacuation nipple off the back of the tube. This plastic keyway or key on the back of this picture tube busted off right away. It was just brittle as can be. So the tube isn't compromised. There's still a vacuum. It didn't break the tube. It just broke the plastic keyway around it, and it makes it difficult to find your orientation. I did mark it, this line, and it kind of only can go in one place. If you get it wrong, the filament doesn't light up. So that's what we have to work around. So here on our CRT tester, we have socket number 2 is our hero. And let's look and see. That white line, this line here would be the key. Well, we're all hooked up here, our CR70, and we're set for to look at the red gun. So let's bring up our filament voltage to about 6 volts. Yeah, and we should be able to see if this is hooked up correctly. Yes, indeed. We can see our filament glowing. So let's just go right up to our, well, let's leave it at 6 volts. And let's just take a look at our red gun settings, our red gun testings. No shorts, no shorts. Let's set our cutoff. Well, all right, so our cutoff. Lots of cutoff. That's amazing. My goodness, look at that. This is the red gun. This is kind of, you gotta be kidding me territory. So if this is actually the original picture tube, I just can't believe it. I mean, maybe this is kind of a low hours set and something went wacky haywire on it. Oh, by the way, I did take the horizontal or the high voltage rectifier tube out, and this was just hanging on by a thread, unfortunately. So we have some repair work to do, but we're not going to throw high voltage to it for a while yet. That was just kind of one of those too bad things, I guess, but that's amazing. So you have individual control of a number of things, which makes it different than other testers. You can't just go flip the switch between red, green, and blue and see the results in each one. You have to set the parameters for each gun. This is the CRT type, so this doesn't change, but it's the cathode, the G1 and G2 assignments on the socket determine the gun. So we just tested the red. The settings were 2, 3, 4. Cathode G1, G2. So now we're on the green gun. The settings would be 6, 7, 5. So cathode will go 6, 7, 5. That would be our green gun. We'll go to our green gun, select. So at that point now we can dial up our filament. Go back up to 6 volts. G1 shorts, no. Check our cutoff. Our cutoff. Well, we have Well, the cutoff control is all the way up, but it's right there at the bottom end of the cutoff setting. And emissions. Huh. Not quite what I thought it would be. So the green gun is pretty weak. I just let this go for a little while. Let's go back to our filament voltage. And we're at 6.3 volts. And let's check our heater to cathode shorts, G1 shorts, good. Cutoff. So by bringing up the filament voltage to where it should be, there's the cutoff roughly in the middle. And let's check our emissions again. Yeah, you know, I mean, this will definitely produce a picture. Our blue gun is this setting, 11, 12, and 13. Cathode, G1, G2. So let's do this. 11, 12, 13. So go to our blue gun. 11, 12, 13. Ooh, what? Cutoff is amazing. What? Do we expect these emissions to be huge? Well, it's pretty good. Checking our filament voltage again, right at 6.3. Let's just go up to 6.3. And cutoff is high. And emission is pretty good. We've got some friends here. And yeah, it's what an old abandoned TV set would look like on the bottom, I guess. You can see this had been submerged in some water up to a point anyway, so the two back legs are Here we are, 1969 all over again. It's just dirty. Yeah. And what do we see here? Is that arcing on this resistor? Let's see. Can we get a closer shot? Suspect. These are the high voltage caps. Most likely from the high voltage boost caps here. This is the vertical output transformer. I actually have a replacement for this, believe it or not. And some of these power resistors are pretty ugly looking, like they've been scorched earth. But maybe not so bad. The cover on the delay line is coming loose, but I don't think that's a problem. Right here, this is the IF strip, the underside of the IF strip. Solid state IF strip. So really, this chassis on the bottom is considerably less complex because of the solid state components in here. The whole IF strip is up on top. Well, there are a number of things in here that I was kind of looking for, and I went in there looking for these coils They all have slugs. Some of them are actually transformers, some of them are inductors. But I'm not sure what these specifically do at this point without consulting the schematic, but this is what I was looking for, and unfortunately, but it's not so bad. But you can see that over the years, Zenith at first began using these inductors, these coils with these fiber tubes, and they have cores inside. And then at a point, they went to using plastic or some kind of plastic, whatever it is, nylon. But some of these, over time, they dissolve, they disintegrate. And this one is busted. Well, you can see at the base of this, this is a transformer. At the base of it, you can see the discoloration, it's yellowed. And clearly the material itself wasn't yellow like that. So if I just jiggle this a little bit, I'm going to be very gentle, but you can see where it's busted. And at this point, I would assume it still has continuity to it. So I think I'm going to put a little bit of clear silicone on the side just before we move on. And here's the I guess it's the 3.58 megahertz oscillator control. So this right here is that transformer that we're looking at, L38. So it's obviously a critical thing. It comes off of the plate on this oscillator. So there would be B plus voltage in there, 200 and whatever that is, 69 volts. So it's important that it's functional, otherwise you wouldn't have color. Well, I'm just going to try to get in here. Yeah. Go. We'll let it set up and we'll just see how we did. But we didn't cover the wires, so we can still read the continuity on that side, and should be able to get at them from underneath as well. They use particle board as just sort of the base infrastructure, and it's it didn't, I got to stop doing this, but obviously it didn't eventually. I guess this is going to need a top coat, something to keep this particle or glue, something, shellac, polyurethane, that's what it is, to keep this all together. This is pretty ugly. Well, the high voltage rectifier here. This is a 3DJ3, but we're testing it as if it's a 3DC3 because there is no 3DJ3 here. Because I guess that's a newer tube than what this listed. So I've got the settings for this 3DC3. And it says on the chart that anything over 25 is good. So it's good. All right. Well, I'm trying to repair this plate cap that comes out of the flyback and goes into the high voltage rectifier. I'm having a hard time. I was having an impossible time getting the solder to flow on this clip. I think it's good enough. And then just splicing this wire back there. Yeah, because it was going to be too short otherwise. Check it out. Rust. Let's look at meat on this. Let's see. 2, blue, 8. 18 and a half megs. 22 megs, 2, 8. Alright, 1 meg, 1 and a half megs. Let's try to get that off. going to use a soldering gun, a little bit more heat. I'm going to add some so I can take some away. The old add and subtract trick. Don't use your soldering gun as a tool. I won't. I'll just use it as a soldering gun. That was easy. It doesn't look like it's a healthy diode. It's just a work of art. Look at that beautiful work of art. Actually, right there, it's 46.5, so that's good. We're gonna leave it. These are both 22 megs. One is actually 22 megs and one is 20 megs, so those are fine. We're gonna leave those, and this is fine as well. Same parts. Hard to believe that those are actually supposed to be the same parts. And this should be 150 picofarads. We're gonna replace it with what we have. It's a 6,000 volt cap. I have 120 picofarad, so that's what we're gonna. This capacitor isn't this capacitor. This capacitor, I was not reading this schematic correctly. It's not that one. It's this one. It's a 3 kilovolt cap. It's a tight tolerance. It's a 22 picofarad. And I noticed it because it's these numbers here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, etc., are the tie points that are listed here on this the diagram, and that is the red, whatever this is, phenolic material. So those tie points here we were looking at is between here and here. I tested all the tubes, and what we know for sure is that the horizontal output tube, which would go back there, and the regulator tube were bad. Didn't need a tube tester to figure that one out. And the rest of them I pulled out and tested, and they're all fine or good enough, except that one right there, which you can see the vacancy. That is a 6Z10, and the 6Z10 is the audio detector and audio output tube right there. And the 6Z10 getter on it was pretty much non-existent at this point. It's a 2-section tube. So we're on this one right there, the second section. Anyway, I'll show you. That seems pretty bad. Because usually when this is just a straight emissions tester, it's nothing fancy. So whenever the tester is whatever inconclusive, it just kind of hovers in the yellow. So this is bad. The other section is weak but good, usable probably. So I've got a couple of others that I found in my box of stuff. I'll put this one in, and I also have a brand new one, but this one I'll use for now. So yeah, this set mostly had Zenith tubes in it. Well, we're back on the side, and soon we're going to be upside down here. So I had completed the testing the tubes, and we kind of took care of the high voltage box, at least for now. Fixed the plate cap lead and the rectifier. And I had plugged it in, brought it up slowly on a dim bulb tester, and long story short, it was just drawing excessive current. Something wasn't right. And like happens, you start to smell stuff. So I shut it off. I was just taking a look at some of this stuff. As an example, down here, it's hard to see, right here and right here, those are the two multi-section capacitor cans C1 and C2. 5 minutes after I shut this thing off, they were still fire hot. So they're just junko. And this, I didn't have a high voltage running when I did this. I had left the horizontal output tube and the damper and the regulator out, so it was just, I wanted to check B plus and see if the oscillators were running. I should have got it on camera, but I was gonna just run it again, and anyway, I didn't want to start it up again like that. And here's another weird thing. This is a resistor. I'm not sure what this is. It's like it's covered with something. But that is a resistor, and at least in circuit it tests all wrong. I think I forgot what the value was, but I looked it up, and so something's crazy. And I'm wondering if it's this boost cap that vented on it. There's all kinds of this weird, it's almost like greasy dirt that's all over this stuff. And yeah, it's the high voltage section, and it attracts trouble. But so we're going to replace these capacitor cans, these two boost filter caps. I have those things on hand. And then up here also, look at this. And look at how many different diodes make up this bridge rectifier. And most notably, look at this one. Okay, so our low voltage supply isn't right either. So we've got to start absolutely by fixing the low voltage supply. So instead of pulling the chassis out of the cabinet, that's a huge project. I'm gonna just tip it on its top so that the bottom service saver bottom is up, and I think I got enough room to work around it. Our upside down Zenith. And we're going to get into some stuff. So this diode right in front of you, actually there's two of them there, are two of the four that make up the bridge rectifier in the low voltage supply, or the B plus supply. And you can see just to the right of that Zenith, gold colored Zenith diode, are two leads that used to make up a third diode. The question at hand is, which diode is that, and what direction, what orientation does that replacement diode have to be? What I've got here is the schematic of this bridge rectifier. And you can see at this point where there are these two anodes that come together, it goes directly to ground. And so that would be the DC negative side of this bridge rectifier. This would be the DC positive side of this bridge rectifier. And so we can check from ground to the leads of two diodes, and we should be able to ascertain where these two diodes are. And then by finding that, we know our third diode that we have in there, and we can see how that's marked. That should give us a clear indication of how our fourth diode that is missing should be oriented. And then also on here you can see this thermistor. That's part of the degaussing little circuit. When you start it up, this is when it's cold, it has a resistance of 140 ohms, it says right here. And then as this heats up, so when it's cold, then there's resistance here, the current flows through this choke and then through the degaussing coil, and then to complete the circuit. And then once it warms up, the current will flow directly into this bridge. So the AC comes in to this junction here, and so both AC lines come from the transformer to this point and ultimately to this point. And this thermistor, I found that one too. It's busted. So next time I try this, I think what I might do is just jumper between it, because it we don't care about the degaussing right now. And ultimately, I'll probably replace that with a CL90. That seems to work all right for this. So there's a bunch of broken things like that that we're just trying to troubleshoot. If I just do something like this, I believe this is one anode. Yeah, you can see over there. And you can't see this other diode, but it's because it's behind this delay line. But I believe this is it also. Yes. So the two gold Zenith diodes would represent chassis ground. So we found that point. And what we want to do now is find the other point, this one, which would be the DC positive output. All right, so unless I really made a mistake, and I got this all wrong, the orientation of this diode would be something like this. And you know, it's very strange to me just how small these new components are, which should be good to 1 amp at 400 volts. It's just so tiny. Unless this is not a 1N 4004. Yeah. All right, let's just dab a little solder on here and pretend we got this figured out. All right, well, we're entering into the ridiculous part of our show. So back here, down here, this is C1 and that's C2. So these are the multi-section capacitor cans, and they're really difficult to see with the chassis in because they're hidden behind the high voltage cage. So this is kind of the end of the high voltage cage, and they go like this. So we're over here by the high voltage land, and this is the vertical output transformer. Interesting that they put it right there. So there's some things that we have to do. When I had this running yesterday, I didn't have a raster, but I had was trying to just see if the oscillators were running and see if the B plus was coming up close to where it should be. And these two cans, especially this one, I think, they got hot as fire. They are just wasted. So I have to recap this. It just won't work otherwise. So on the schematic, just to give you an idea, this is C1, one section of C1, the 80 microfarad. So that comes right off of the bridge rectifier we just looked at, fixed, I guess. And it's hard to see because I scanned and printed this schematic, but these are all sections of C2. And then over here in our vertical circuit, we have a section of C1 also. So these are critical components. The low voltage supply has to be right, and the vertical circuit has to be right, otherwise it just won't work, or it won't work correctly. And then other sections of C1 and C2 are scattered throughout the chassis. So we're going to get into this. And so the ridiculous part of this conversation is that I don't actually have individual components. Plus, it would be kind of difficult to get in here. I decided not to take the chassis out, at least at this point. I just wanted to get it running, see a raster, and the completion of it would have the chassis coming up, but it's a big deal to get this thing out. So what I thought I would do, if I could find them, is this. Don't laugh. This is breaking conventional logic. I've had these. Well, I bought a lot, meaning a large group of Zenith parts, and in that collection were a bunch of these multi-section electrolytic caps. Now, conventional wisdom says don't use these. These are bad. They're as old as the set. And maybe that's true, but they're new old stock, and they're in these sealed bags. They've never been opened. And since I don't really have an option right now, I think what I'm going to try to do is at least take one of them out of the chassis and reinstall or install one of these multi-sections. I think I have access to get in there. It's going to be a little kind of ugly, maybe a little hacky, but I think I can get in there and do that. And this one, I think C2 is especially ugly. And since so much of the B+ supply rails rely on that cap for filtration, I think we're going to start there. Although I think I can get this out. This is a mess. I don't recommend doing this. Mega. Oh yeah, look at that! We did it. Oh yeah. And you can, I don't know if you can see it, but this thing was oozing junk yesterday. Electrolyte. So this thing was baked. It was time to change. All right, well, we got this out. Now I'm encouraged. I was very discouraged a minute ago. Yeah, it's one of the twist tabs. It probably took about, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half, maybe more. It's supposed to be a 20, I think that's red, brown, so a 220 ohm. And this, I don't know what this black stuff is. I can feel it. It's got a texture to it, like it was arcing. And when I check it with an ohm meter, the reading is just wacky. It's not right. So the only way to check this is to snip it out. This particular, that's a resistor, and it's got, I don't even know what that stuff is. It's like, I don't know. It's an accumulation of something that's made this whole thing black. It's not even a discoloration of the resistor, because I checked the resistor. But before that, let's see if, let me try a little acetone or something to see if we can get this, whatever this junk is, off of it, so we can read the value. I think I know what it is. And then this one right here, I think this is 220 ohms. But we should snip it out. There's enough lead that we can snip it and hook it back together if it's good, or we can replace it. And that's what you get. So, all right, we may have just found the reason why the high voltage why this whole high voltage circuit looks baked. So we have this regulator tube that's dead, totally dead, and the horizontal output tube is completely dead also. All right, so I just wanted to double check. This is the resistor we just took out. See what it says. 26.88 megs. Well, that's not that's not 220. I just keep double checking this, wondering if I've made some mistake. Am I looking at the wrong resistor? But I don't think so. Okay, so here's this 220 ohm. This is actually a 5 watt. 218 ohms. Okay, so that's the one we're going to put in. I saved a little bit of lead here. I think there's enough. Make a hook and make a hook. Much better than trying to get into those solder cones. Those are, no, not today. Well, I snipped this resistor out of circuit. It goes to the same point on this solder cone strip where that 0.1 microfarad 1000 volt cap goes. And this cap is, according to the exploded diagram, well, that resistor should be R138, and the capacitor should be right there. C123. So, this is actually pretty hard to find all this stuff. Right here in the high voltage circuit is the C123. And the resistor that's attached to it directly, assuming this may or may not be the right one, has it labeled as R248. However, right here, R38, right there, the one that we're looking at measuring, wait a minute. Well, let's look at this first. R38, 138 is here in the vertical circuit, and that is a 470 ohm 2 watt. And if we measure this, it says it's a 44.7 ohms. So this is very confusing because this seems correct. If that is the capacitor, then that resistor that's 40 should be 47 ohms is basically 45 ohms. That seems correct, but the part number here is different. So I'm kind of baffled by this, actually. There's clearly a mistake. Well, I was just bringing this up slowly on a Variac, watching the current, and there was excessive current draw again. And look at that resistor. That's the 470 ohm that we put in there. A 2 watt. So maybe it's a 47. Maybe it's supposed to be 47 ohms. I don't know. The new capacitor can that we put in was pretty cool underneath. The old one that I hadn't changed is warm. That one, warm. Underneath here, you can't see it, but this one I'm touching right there. That is the new can, C2. It's cool as a cucumber. The one next to it is warm, very warm. Very warm, way warmer than it should be, almost hot. So I guess we changed that. But that resistor, either there's something else wrong with this set, or do not recommend you do this when you're frustrated, which is exactly where I am right now. Success. This is what it is. It's still warm. All right, I've got to see if I have one of these also. What is this? A 40 at 400. Well, last night has transformed into today. And I just wanted to show you first off what I've done here. I've jumpered some things. These two plugs would have gone together here, and I believe this is the lead that goes to the on-off switch. And I think the on-off switch is sort of stuck in on position, which is fine for our needs, but I just jumpered it here anyway. So that is, it's on, and then this particular jumper, this would normally plug into this, which goes to the Space Command chassis. And then the Space Command chassis has the manual or automatic switch, which means that in the up manual position, you can control the on-off of the set from the front panel. And in the automatic position, you have to use the remote control. But I think all of the motors that are up here, I believe the motors get the power, it's their power from the Space Command chassis. So anyway, we bypassed the Space Command chassis right now, and I believe that is the correct I believe that's the correct jumper position. And I got that information from the SAMs over here. And I also looked at the Zenith literature. It's kind of a head scratcher, but that first jumper was that, bypassing the on-off switch, and then the second jumper was here, which would send power to the space command. But what we're doing is we're just looping it back through here. So that's what we're doing. Now I wanted to point out one thing that just had me perplexed for quite a while today. It's this number right here. That in the SAMs says that this primary of this, the main transformer, should be 95 ohms, but that cannot possibly be correct. I'm reading about 1.2 ohms. I think that number on the schematic should be 0.95 ohms. 0.95, so an ohm. That would make sense. So what we got going on here is going into the probes. This is on ohms resistance, so it's 1.2. So that primary is 1.2 ohms. But I was baffled today. I wondered if this primary was just totally shorted, but no. So we've got our variac turned way down, our kilowatt meter, this is set for volts right now, so we've got 40 volts coming out of the variac, and we're going into the, it's a 60 watt bulb, and we've got, well, 37 volts coming out of the dim bulb tester, and that would mean there's that much right here. So when we plug this in, we should get some glowage in here. Yes, we do. Bright. Today's a bright day. Bright and overcast. So let's bring this up. Let's see what we get. Around 50 volts. Yeah, we'll park it there for a minute. And this is what's coming out of our plug going into the chassis. So 16 volts going into the chassis, and so 16 volts here, and then across our 1 amp B plus fuse we have 46 volts. So it's kind of appropriate, I guess. It's tracking. The B plus should be, well, there's several sources here, but 390, and that's what we're monitoring right there. So it goes through the bridge rectifier, goes through this choke, filtered to ground. 390 on one source, two 390 sources, a 250 something or other source, a 134 source, 250, 24 for the IF and the transistors. So yeah, okay, we're just gonna let this go for a little while. I've had it on for a while. Very low voltage. It's not up enough for any of the filaments to glow. Not at only 20 volts. So I'm just gonna keep turning it up over, I don't know, a little bit of time. And then we'll take the dim bulb out and variac it up to another point. Well, it's been about 15 minutes, and turned up the variac slightly as we were going along. So we got about 40 volts AC going into the set. And it is interesting to note that the voltage ratio is tracking correctly. So if we're looking at a B plus of 390 and we have 117 coming in, that's about 2.5 times the line voltage. And that's kind of tracking with what we've got going into the set, 40 volts, and what we've got at the B plus fuse. It's about 2.5 times. So yeah, the B plus is going to be fine when this thing is all up and running. Just went to the 100-watt floodlight. That's all I have. So we're at 117 volts coming out of our Variac, and yeah, so with that 100-watt going from a 60 to 100, brought the voltage up another 20 volts, 22 volts. So that's what's going into the set right now, 70 volts, and we're getting 180 volts at our B plus. So things are coming together. Some of the tubes are beginning to get warm, so the filaments have something going on. Not all of them are warm. Oh, look at that. We even have glowage inside of the picture tube. So that's good. Well, I've had this cooking for about, I don't know, half an hour or so. And right now there's 81 volts going into the set. 100-watt bulb. Looking at this, and this is the Convergence panel. And I know that it's accessible from what looks like a speaker panel in the front, but I was a little perplexed about how to get it open. So I'm kind of sitting here looking at it, and I kind of noticed this thing underneath. I don't know if you can see it very clearly. No, you can't. But that clip back there in the center of the picture, it looks like it should slide up and down, actually holds that little panel in place. So let's take a look over here on this side of it. It's underneath. It's underneath. You flip down the control panel, and it's that right there. It's a 1/4 inch. It's a 1/4 inch screw, and this should enable. Yeah, this panel should just come right out now. Oh yes, I pushed it. I just gave it a shove from the other side. Popped loose. There we go. That's how you get that panel out. Actually, this would have been a speaker panel on other models. But since we have high fidelity here, 2 6x9 speakers in the back. But that's it. There we go. Look at that. There's our Convergence panel. How fantastic. That is exciting as can be. You can adjust the Convergence right in front by looking at it. Oh yeah, just like that. Oh yeah. And then that goes up like that. Put a little snuggie on it. There we go. We're gonna just leave it be for now. That's how you take that panel off. Okay, so I got to figure out what to do about this high voltage mess. The flyback, the